stands as the most iconic portrayal of Jesus Christ ever created, Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. This timeless work of art transcends mere source for conspiracy theories, offering instead the most enduring and iconic representation of Jesus' physical appearance in popular culture through the years. However, as time moves forward, there is growing speculation about the accuracy of the portrayal of history's most celebrated figure. There's been a growing agreement that Jesus was of Middle Eastern descent, rather than European. This recognition has sparked discussions about the cultural inaccuracies prevalent in traditional depictions of him. In response, contemporary artists and scientists are striving to create more accurate and respectful visual interpretations of Jesus Christ. Among these innovators, Richard Neve stands out for his pioneering anthropological reconstructions, while Bas Uterwijk is celebrated for his realistic digital portrayals. The persistent debate over Christ's true likeness is expected, given the Holy Bible's silence on his physical features, which leads us to a crucial question. Are there any artifacts available that could provide insight into what Jesus might have looked like? Fortunately for us, there exists a remarkable relic that provides just that glimpse: the Shroud of Turin. This burial shroud captures the vivid, life-size imprints of a crucified man, unparalleled in detail by any other artifact around the globe, believed by many to depict Jesus himself. Despite its historical significance, the cloth has stirred controversy, facing skepticism, and being labeled by some as the most intricate and masterful hoax in history. But in this video, we'll dive into the most compelling proof that shows the shroud is more than just an old piece of cloth. It's a real glimpse into what Jesus looked like. This evidence is so persuasive that even the most skeptical viewers might find themselves reevaluating their stance on the shroud's authenticity. To truly appreciate the transformation of Jesus' portrayal over time, we must journey back to the most ancient depiction discovered. This image captures a moment shared in all three synoptic Gospels: the miraculous healing of a paralyzed man, lowered through a roof to meet Jesus. In this depiction, the healed man, now bearing his bed, stands to the left, while Jesus is illustrated on the right, embodying the traditional Roman aesthetic with short hair, a bare face, and adorned in a modest tunic and cloak. However, this particular depiction is believed to date back to around 235 AD, highlighting the scarcity of visual representations from the first 2 centuries after Jesus' passing. There is one particularly intriguing discovery that is believed to be an even older representation of Jesus, though it serves not to honor, but to mock him. In this instance, Jesus' facial features are not depicted, as the image is merely a piece of crude graffiti. Discovered on the walls of Rome's Palatine Hill, this image was crafted by a non-Christian to ridicule a believer named Aleximenos. Accompanied by a mocking Greek inscription, Aleximenos worships his god. The drawing depicts a figure, likely Aleximenos, next to a crucified figure with a donkey's head, intentionally distorting Jesus' image. This serves as a poignant reminder of the scorn and derision early Christians endured from their contemporaries. Through time, the way Jesus looks in pictures has changed, showing what artists felt during their time. Yet the image of Jesus that most people know today comes from Warner Salmon's Head of Christ, made in 1940, with Jesus having light eyes and hair. Salmon leveraged his marketing expertise to make his depiction of Jesus a global icon. In 2023, the imagery of the Shroud of Turin was brought to life in a remarkable way when the Salamanca Cathedral revealed an awe-inspiring, hyper-realistic sculpture of Jesus Christ. This masterpiece, known as the Mystery Man, was intricately designed using detailed information from the Shroud of Turin. Crafted from latex and silicone and embellished with real human hair, this lifelike sculpture weighs in at around 165 pounds. The sculpture captures the solemn stillness of death, with the body's rigidity reflecting rigor mortis. The legs are subtly bent and the hands are respectfully positioned over the lower abdomen, encapsulating the dignified serenity of Christ in crucifixion. The head of the figure is marked by poignant wounds and bloodstains, reminiscent of the agony endured from the crown of thorns. Thanks to this revolutionary sculpture, we've got a pretty clear picture of what Jesus might have looked like. But the big question is, how can we confirm the authenticity of this cloth as the genuine burial shroud of Jesus? You might expect scientists to be the first to question the shroud's authenticity, but you're in for a surprise. In fact, it's the scientists leading the charge who are reinforcing the evidence that supports the cloth's genuine nature. For example, Professor Giulio Fanti from the University of Padua developed a novel dating method by examining the decay of linen fibers. This technique dates the cloth to around 33 AD, aligning with the time of Jesus' burial. Another one is Professor Liberato De Caro of the Italian National Research Council, who utilized sophisticated X-ray techniques to authenticate the shroud's linen as originating from the 1st century. By analyzing a thread from the shroud alongside a textile discovered at the historically significant Masada site besieged in 73 AD, De Caro's research decisively places the shroud within the context of ancient history, affirming its authenticity. On the other hand, Dr. Joseph Kolbach's intriguing study unveiled traces of limestone on the shroud, identical to the variety found in Jerusalem's tombs, known as Jerusalem limestone, predominantly sourced from this ancient city. Remarkably, the limestone residue on the shroud bore a striking resemblance to samples from near the Damascus Gate in the vicinity of Golgotha. This compelling evidence hints that the individual, wrapped in the shroud, may have traversed through Jerusalem prior to crucifixion, weaving a tangible connection to the historical landscape of Jesus' final days. Physicists John Jackson and Eric Jumper proposed a captivating theory regarding the subtle imprints above the eyes on the shroud's figure, suggesting they could be coins, a practice seen in Jewish burials of the 1st century. Intriguingly, the size of these imprints aligns closely with the dimensions of coins from the time of Pontius Pilate, spanning from 2 BC to 33 AD, drawing a fascinating link to the historical period of Jesus. If the works of these experts aren't enough, then let's take a look at the most astonishing discovery found by the team at the International Center of Studies on the Shroud of Turin, headquartered in Paris. The team observed 3 distinct, evenly spaced lines devoid of imagery beneath and around the chin area. They proceeded to carefully divide official photographs of the shroud into countless small fragments, assigning a specific brightness level to each. Following this, they utilized specialized software to conduct an in-depth visual analysis of these fragments. The outcome of this meticulous analysis was truly remarkable, as it uncovered a series of letters woven into the fabric in both Latin and Greek. Within these subtle inscriptions, references to Jesus were identified, including a clear mention of the term Nazarene. It's widely theorized that these texts were initially written on a separate piece of parchment by a scribe, then laid over the shroud, specifically over the face. This approach was probably chosen to help bereaved family members identify their loved one and perform the necessary burial ceremonies. The properties of the ink from that period could have facilitated the transfer of the text onto the linen. Importantly, this act of inscribing did not interfere with the creation of the shroud's mysterious image. This breakthrough discovery was important for 2 reasons. First, it challenged the notion that the inscription was of medieval origin. This is due to the fact that in that period, no Christian, certainly not a forger, would dare mention Jesus without acknowledging his divinity, for fear of being condemned as a heretic. Secondly, specialists have affirmed that the script of the inscribed words corresponds with the writing styles found in the Middle East during the 1st century, the period during which Jesus lived. Now let's pause and think about what some folks are saying, that this relic is just an elaborate hoax. You'd imagine that if that were the case, scientists would have cracked the code on how it was made after thoroughly examining the shroud. But that's not what happened. Quite on the contrary, even with the most sophisticated technological tools at their disposal, scientists are still confused by the mysterious method by which the shroud's image came to be. This is despite the fact that experts were granted 5 consecutive 24-hour days to examine it at the royal palace. After their thorough research, they've come up with this conclusion: the image contains no pigment, suggesting it is not a result of paint or any known artistic method. This conclusion is further bolstered by the shroud's resilience to damage from 3 separate fires and exposure to water, which would have likely altered or damaged a painted or inked surface. Even without using some fancy technology, the image on the shroud would stand on its own to confirm its authenticity. It captures with astonishing precision the grueling specifics of a first-century crucifixion, exactly as one might expect. Far from being just another crucifixion portrayal, the shroud intimately aligns with the vivid narratives of Jesus' ordeal detailed in the Gospels. This is exemplified by the depiction of Jesus' crucifixion enduring for merely 6 hours, in stark contrast to the prolonged agony of typical Roman crucifixions that could span several days, underscoring the intense severity of his suffering. The shroud also captures a unique detail from the Gospels. Jesus' legs were left intact, contrary to the typical crucifixion method designed to hasten death. This significant deviation, which fulfills a prophecy, is vividly corroborated by the shroud's imagery. A common modern misunderstanding is the belief that crucifixion involved nailing hands through the palms. However, archaeological evidence has debunked this notion, showing instead that nails were driven through the wrists to ensure stability and allow the crucified to adjust their position for breath. This critical detail is accurately reflected in the nail marks on the shroud, reinforcing its authenticity, as a forger from a later period would not likely have known this specific aspect of Roman crucifixion practices. Just as a corroborating witness in the real world strengthens the credibility of a testimony, the Shroud of Turin finds validation in a similar artifact, the Sudarium of Oviedo. Left to have been placed over the face of Jesus after his crucifixion, this twin cloth reinforces the authenticity of the shroud. The credibility of these 2 cloths is reinforced by overlapping evidence. Notably, both bear blood and lymph stains of the AB type, a rarity in the broader population, but more prevalent among Jewish communities. Another extraordinary correlation came to light when the facial features extracted from the Shroud of Turin through the VP8 image analyzer were aligned with the geometric and physical details of the Sudarium. This comparison revealed a remarkable match between the 2. Through advanced palynological analysis, scientists have made a remarkable discovery with the fabrics, traces of pollen that act as clear geographical indicators. The majority of these pollen grains were exclusive to Palestinian plants, with some being particularly linked to Jerusalem. Moreover, both cloths bear distinctive traces of limestone dust characterized by low strontium levels, mirroring the specific limestone composition of Calvary in Jerusalem. This particular geochemical footprint robustly anchors both cloths to the Jerusalem landscape, resonating with the time of Jesus. Ultimately, the Shroud of Turin serves as a mute witness to the deep suffering and sacrifice Jesus Christ endured for humanity. What truly counts is not the quantity of evidence laid out, but rather the faith nurtured within our hearts and souls, recognizing the boundless pain Jesus Christ underwent for our salvation and redemption. But what are your thoughts about this? I hope you like our story. Until the next one. Years ago, one of the most known figures in history, Jesus Christ, was born. He conducted a ministry in Judea in which he proclaimed his identity as the Son of God. As a consequence of this, he was crucified, and according to Christian doctrine, he experienced resurrection after spending 2 nights in a tomb. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the cornerstone of the Christian faith. One of the most disputed, sacred relics is believed to stand as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for Christ's resurrection, the Shroud of Turin. Mocked by the scientific community as a mere medieval forgery, mainly due to previous carbon dating results, the shroud underwent a thorough examination. Despite all skepticism, it frequently seems as if a divine influence is directing its path to reveal to the world that it does, in fact, hold the memory of one of Christianity's holiest occurrences, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In a breakthrough hailed as one of the most momentous in the history of the holy relic, researchers managed to unveil an inscribed name on it, providing conclusive proof of its authenticity. Before we delve further into this recent discovery, let's first explore the rich historical background of the shroud. In the Gospel of John, we find a reference to the burial clothes left in the tomb, and it appears that these garments played a pivotal role in John's belief in Jesus' resurrection. It's believed that the Shroud of Turin may have been used to envelop the body of Jesus Christ upon his resurrection. Given the ongoing questioning of the Shroud of Turin's authenticity, providing a definitive history for it is also a challenging task. The first documented historical reference to the shroud appears in a text from 1389, which recounts a public exhibition of the shroud in 1355 in Lire, France, by a French knight named Geoffrey de Charnay. Nevertheless, it faced resistance even from within the church. Bishop Pierre d'Arcis of Troyes, and a letter to the Pope, labeled it as a skillfully crafted painting and a deliberate forgery. The shroud eventually came into the possession of the House of Savoy, Italy's royal family, in 1453, and it remained in their ownership until 1986, when it was bequeathed to Pope John Paul II and his successors upon the death of Umberto II of Savoy. Starting in 1464, the shroud found a home in a dedicated chapel in Chambéry, nestled in the French Alps. A significant event occurred there on December 4, 1532, when a fire damaged the shroud, leading some to speculate that this incident may have influenced the controversial results of the 1988 radiocarbon dating of the material. In 1578, this relic discovered its sanctuary within the royal chapel of the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista in Turin, Italy. Subsequently, it gained widespread recognition as the Shroud of Turin. The shroud is truly extraordinary, presenting a three-dimensional rendering of an entire human form. This burial fabric exhibits exceptionally detailed, life-size depictions of a crucified man, unlike any other artifact in the world. This image is believed to depict none other than Jesus Christ himself. In an era where technology's prowess allows for nearly boundless achievements, it remains a perplexing enigma that no one has succeeded in replicating the mysterious image or the distinctive characteristics of the Holy Shroud. The Shroud of Turin has been a topic of fervent debate and has been subjected to rigorous examination for more than 115 years. Nevertheless, the weight of substantial findings leans towards its association with Jesus Christ. You might remember the carbon dating tests from 1988 that were initially used to challenge its authenticity. But these tests have now been shown to be wrong, conflicting with other scientific methods, archaeological data, and physical evidence. Let's begin by discussing the recent discoveries made by Dr. Gilbert R. Lavoie, a dedicated researcher who has devoted 20 years to a unique blend of medical and scriptural investigations regarding this sacred relic. He has recently unveiled compelling evidence that unequivocally establishes the shroud as a representation of the precise moment of Jesus' resurrection. He arrived at the conclusion that the image on the shroud portrays an individual in an upright position, rather than a figure in a supine burial posture. A close examination of the frontal image of the shroud reveals that the hair cascades down on both sides of the face, following the natural pull of gravity. This same gravitational principle holds true when scrutinizing the back image, where the hair flows over the shoulders and descends down the back, perfectly in sync with the posture of an upright individual. The pivotal factor here is the force of gravity, which profoundly influences not only the behavior of the hair, but also the overall appearance of the body when it transitions from an upright position to a supine one. This revelation was substantiated through a series of experiments in which an unclothed individual reclined on his back atop a glass surface. Illustrated by the artist's renditions, it becomes evident how the man's hair naturally flows backward and lies flattened against the glass. Moreover, there is a noticeable compression in the anatomical contours of the back, buttocks, and lower legs. The image on the shroud is expected to match the traditional supine burial position that has been widely assumed. Nevertheless, the actual depiction of the shroud contradicts this anticipated alignment. Instead, it presents an anatomical form closely resembling that of an upright individual. The flowing hair and the bodily configuration of the man imprinted on the shroud undeniably reflect the stance of an upright person. Moreover, the figure on the shroud isn't shown as if he's standing or resting on anything. He seems to be floating, which raises the question, why does he appear suspended in mid-air? The answer to this mystery might well be rooted in the Holy Bible. This striking visual representation serves as a profound testament to the resurrection of Jesus. Furthermore, numerous discoveries on the shroud provide compelling evidence for its association with the image of Jesus Christ. An illustrative instance is the research conducted by Dr. Joseph Kolbach, who identified limestone containing dirt on the shroud. This limestone was just like the kind found in the tombs of Jesus in Jerusalem. It's called Jerusalem limestone, and it's mainly from Jerusalem. What's interesting is that the limestone on the shroud looked a lot like a sample from the Damascus Gate, which is close to Golgotha. This suggests that the person on the shroud probably walked around Jerusalem before being crucified. Moreover, the image on the shroud appeared to vividly capture the marks of the hardships and injuries that Jesus Christ experienced on the path to his ultimate sacrifice, the crucifixion. Abrasions on both shoulders suggest the strain of carrying a heavy, rough object like a cross, while abrasions on one knee imply that the man fell, leaving traces of dirt. Other areas on the shroud show a mixture of soil and blood, indicating that he hit his head on the ground during his fall to his knees. There were marks like thorns on the head, as if a crown of thorns had been pressed onto it painfully. The wrist wound on the shroud seems to be around the size of a 1 square centimeter square. Interestingly, in Rome, there's a church called the Holy Cross of Jerusalem that houses relics discovered by St. Helen, Emperor Constantine's mother. Among these relics, there's a nail believed to have been used in crucifixions, and astonishingly, it measures precisely 1 square centimeter in size. The Shroud of Turin also displays a distinctive elliptical wound on the side, roughly 2 inches in width, a dimension that corresponds to the size of a Roman spear. The depiction on the shroud further reveals a separation between the red blood and clear blood serum, a phenomenon commonly observed when an individual has succumbed to death and sustained a wound. This separation results in the distinct discharge of both blood and water from the side wound, a detail explicitly mentioned in the Gospel of John. These specific characteristics align with only one account in history pertaining to a singular individual. The most touching part was the stains on the shroud, thought to be his blood. People said these stains were special reminders of the sacrifice made for humanity by Jesus. These details collectively add to the compelling evidence of the shroud's authenticity and the sufferings endured by the individual it represents. Additionally, the shroud contained traces of 49 different types of pollen. Out of these, 33 were only found in plants from Palestine, and 3 were unique to Jerusalem. This botanical evidence strongly indicates that the shroud likely came from a time between March and April. It's even possible that one of these plants was used to make the crown of thorns. Physicists John Jackson and Eric Jumper had an interesting idea about the faint marks over the eyes of the man on the shroud. They thought these marks might be coins, possibly used in Jewish burials during the 1st century. What's fascinating is that these coins were very similar in size to the ancient coins used in the era of Pontius Pilate, from 2 BC to 33 AD. Moreover, the shroud's dimensions are remarkably close to an old measurement standard, measuring 2 by 8 cubits. Interestingly, a 3-inch wide side strip on the shroud was sewn using a special stitch that was only used in Palestine during the 1st century, creating a strong link to that historical period. Common depictions of crucifixion often show individuals being nailed through their palms, but archaeological findings challenge these portrayals from the Middle Ages. Research has confirmed that the nails used in crucifixion were actually driven through the wrists. This specific placement provided more stability and allowed the victim to move up and down on the cross, making it easier to breathe. The nail locations on the shroud image match this, adding to its authenticity. And if that's not astonishing enough, there's another recent revelation that comes from researchers in Palermo, Italy. They've made a groundbreaking discovery that suggests the image on the shroud isn't static. Instead, it displays subtle movements, akin to stroboscopic photography, where the figure seems to undergo slight shifts caused by intense bursts of energy radiating from the body. This adds an extra layer of fascination and enigma to the already captivating tale of the Shroud of Turin. The research outcomes unveil that the figure on the shroud is presented in different poses, indicating that the hands, feet, and chest exhibited movement in sync with the individual's breath. This revelation strongly implies the depiction of Jesus' resurrection on the Shroud of Turin. Nonetheless, the most substantial revelation pertaining to the shroud has emerged from a Paris-based organization, the International Center of Studies on the Shroud of Turin. Concealed within the fabric, researchers from this institution have unveiled astonishing findings, inscriptions that defy easy explanation. It can be observed that beneath and to the sides of the chin, there are 3 distinct and evenly spaced lines where no image appears. These scientists carefully broke down the official shroud photos into many small squares, gave each square a level of brightness, and then used a program to analyze them visually. As a result, a set of letters gradually emerged, written in both Latin and Greek. These inscriptions reference Jesus, and one side bears the word Nazarene. The prevailing theory suggests that the text was inscribed on a separate document by a scribe, and then affixed to the shroud over the face, a practice intended to aid relatives in the proper identification and burial of the deceased. The composition of the ink employed during that period could have facilitated the transfer of the writing onto the linen. Importantly, this inscription procedure did not interfere with the technique used to generate the image on the shroud. According to researchers, this discovery effectively rules out the chance of the text originating from medieval times. They argue that even during that era, no Christian, not even a forger, would have referenced Jesus without recognizing his divine nature. Failing to do so would have carried the peril of being labeled a heretic. The improved images of the excerpted words have also been shared with other specialists, and they agreed that the writing style was consistent with the typical script from the Middle East during the 1st century, which corresponds to the time of Jesus. This unquestionably verifies that the person imprinted on the shroud is indeed none other than Jesus, who selflessly gave his life for our salvation. This raises a significant question. Just how crucial is the narrative of Jesus' resurrection to Christian believers? In essence, without the resurrection story, the foundational belief in God's redeeming grace through Jesus would collapse. In rising from the dead, Jesus unequivocally affirmed his status as the Son of God and the fulfillment of his mission to bring atonement, redemption, reconciliation, and salvation to humanity. The resurrection was not metaphorical. It involved the actual physical revival of Jesus' body from death. As depicted in all the gospel accounts in the early hours of a Sunday morning, a group of women who had been devoted followers of Jesus made their way to his tomb with the intention of preparing his body for a proper burial. To their amazement, upon reaching the tomb, they discovered that the massive stone obstructing the tomb's entrance had been rolled away, and the tomb was found to be unoccupied. According to the Synoptic Gospels, a radiant figure manifested and conveyed to these women the astonishing news of Jesus' resurrection. In John's distinctive narrative, Mary Magdalene had an encounter with an individual who initially appeared as a gardener, but upon addressing her by name, he unmistakably revealed himself as Jesus. Despite variations in the details of their accounts, all the Gospels harmoniously affirm that in the days that followed, numerous disciples had direct encounters with Jesus and felt his presence. The resurrection serves as the pinnacle of the Passion narrative in all 4 Gospels, as it stands at the very core of the concept of redemption. It instills in us a profound sense of gratitude for the Messiah, who is none other than the Son of the living God, willingly offering his life as a ransom for many. He currently reigns at the right hand of God, and one day, he will return in glory to restore this fractured world. What are your thoughts about this? I hope you like our story. Until the next one.